seminar. Thank you all for hanging in there. How's everybody feeling right now? Oh yeah, great. There were some people who've been here for a few seminars, so we really appreciate that. You know, I forgot to give a shout out earlier to the AV team here. So we've got Jay, David, Blaine, and Moses. Did I forget anybody? So thank you. They've been working really hard to make sure everybody looks beautiful on the stage and that we sound great. So thank you, gents. Really appreciate that. So behind me, we have Tobin Ellis. Some of you may know him. He is the owner of Bar Magic in Las Vegas. He's a 29-year veteran of our industry. He's been spent 15 years designing bars and consulting for 20 years with the likes of Hilton, Starbucks, Caesars Entertainment, MGM Resorts. He has his own line of award-winning signature underbar equipment manufactured by Perlick. And let me tell you, the first time I saw the gentleman speak, I think it was at PDX Cocktail Week a few years ago, maybe 2011 or 12. And you did a seminar on, I think it was on free pouring. And he had this really sexy leather apron on. He was just walking up and down the aisles. I'm like, man, that guy has charisma. I mean, so get ready. I think this is going to be a really great presentation. So please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mr. Tobin Ellis.
Thanks, Frankie. Thanks. Hey, what's up, guys? All right. Good, awesome. Let's do this. I'm going to fly through it. Just a couple disclaimers first. I have adult onset cough variant asthma. It's kicked up in the last couple of weeks. Thanks secondhand smoke when they were smoking in bars, getting it blown in my face for 20 years. So I might be stopping for inhalers and water and all that, so try to just look through that. And secondly, I am, without a doubt, the clumsiest motherfucker in the room. I promise you. I'm definitely falling or tripping at some point. AV guys, be ready. In fact, I was thinking about whether I should admit that or not at home, trying to just kind of warm myself up in practice. Swear to God, I turned around and stubbed my toe into my own couch. Norman, I named my couches. So today that's what we're going to talk about is how does a clumsy son of a bitch like me end up trying to help bartenders be faster, more efficient, prevent injuries, and ultimately design spaces that kind of feed into what we all want, which is to be able to do the dance, right, behind the bar. Just real quick, I'm curious, just quick show of hands. Bartenders, where you at? Let me see you. Okay, bar managers, owners, beverage directors, that kind of thing. Oh, it's same, double up, awesome. Like any architects, designers? Yep, awesome, great. How about just like you're just here because you got lost and you thought this was going to be something completely different? Oh, thank you, sir. Good luck. You're in trouble. All right, so let's hit it. Bartender biomechanics. What are we talking about? Study the movement of living organisms, specifically related to what we all do for a living or have done, and are gluttons for punishment. Let's start the list. Plantar fasciitis, carpal tunnel. Show of hands, anybody? Where's my carpal tunnel? Plantar fasciitis, lateral epicondylitis. Thank you, yeah, for a year now. Okay, anyone have a C5, C6, cervical radiculopathy? It's funny how many hands are going up. Yeah, with the gifts of bartending, the career that keeps giving. Anybody else got, I know we got the backs and the knees and the ripped clothes and all that good stuff. Anybody else have any really fun bartender-related injuries? I'm curious, who in the room, show of hands, who has a long-term injury absolutely from being behind the wood? Let's see some hands. Okay, how many people have been bartending for less than 10 years? How many people for more than 10 years? All these hands right now, more than 10 years. Let me see, keep them up, put them down if you don't have the injuries. Put them down if you don't have the injuries. Okay, about 50-50. Okay, well you got a lot of surprises waiting for you guys. 3 parts today. Injury prevention, specifically we're going to talk about RSIs, repetitive stress injuries. Number 2, efficiency behind the bar. Really trying to talk about throughput and how we can be more efficient and faster behind the bar. And then finally, how does that translate into the design world and designing spaces that tie into these principles? So the first thing is really understanding where all these injuries come from is the biomechanical stresses. There's a bunch. The 4 main ones are right up here. Compression, pushing things together, tension, pulling them apart, torsion, twisting them around, and shearing, 2 forces going in parallel planes but in different directions, kind of like scissors, right? Across like this. And this is what we're doing to our body all day long, and these are the things that we have to watch out for the most. This is where all the pain comes from. Specifically, what I didn't know until recently, which is I think kind of fascinating, have you ever gotten home from a shift or in general and felt like a weird tingling down your arm or maybe your pinky finger, these two fingers? Understanding what that's connected to can help you kind of see these early warning signs. So for example, I started having neck pain and assumed, well, this is something to do with my neck. It's actually nothing to do with my neck. It was all starting through my arms and my shoulders. And we learned, of course, that it's a lot of the cervical spine, the C5, the C6, that are way up here by your neck, but they're connected way down to your fingers. So that's where a lot of these problems come from, is the mechanics we're doing behind the bar are ending up hitting our cervical spine, and we're having these issues where there's compression in the spine, we're pinching nerves, and there's tension that is causing temporary and long-term injuries. So just kind of having a sense of that can help quite a bit. A little play. And the one that I've been dealing with now, I've been in physical therapy for about 5 months, is cervical radiculopathy, which is basically that C5, C6 issue. And what I want to share with you some things you can do to kind of prevent some of this. So do I have any actors, musicians in the room familiar with the Alexander technique, the breathing technique? Part of the Alexander technique is head on a string. And the idea is, and I'm horrible at this, is to imagine having a string attached to your head and always pulling up on that string when you walk and when you work. So instead of like my crappy posture like this, you want to be up like this and always think about having that head up. And that's keeping that expansion in the spine instead of letting it compress, which is what happens quite a bit when your shoulders hunch forward. So there's just one quick idea on that. A lot of these injuries that we talk about, it's so funny, come from what we do for a living. You guys might know the posters, and if you own a bar, you're familiar with OSHA, the government's guideline on basically how to be safe at work. Well, this is something that, if you're not familiar, it's called the OSHA neutral work position. And this is what the government recommends based on the medical profession, how everyone at work, the things they should be avoiding at work, and you want to be in this neutral position. Here's the things you don't want to do in any job ever. You don't ever want to have to bend down low. You don't ever want to have to reach up high. You don't want to have any hyperextension. You don't want compression, tension and compression and torsion. You don't want to have to bend like this. And you definitely do not ever want to stand like this even for a minute. Right? These are all the things to avoid. But one of the worst ones of all, of course, and it's right on the board here, is you don't want to be turning your neck side to side. Don't ever do that. And definitely don't repeatedly turn your wrists over with any kind of weight in them. We're fucked. It's like, okay, so don't bartend. Yeah, exactly, don't bartend. So what I try to talk about and try to design and train bartenders is all of the mechanical ideas that can help us get as close to this OSHA neutral work position as possible, even though it's impossible. So we still try to do it. So here's some things you can do to try to minimize all these issues. Number one is your stance. I've seen videos of myself bartending. I'm like, oh my God, you're the poster child for the problem. Okay? Trying to keep your shoulders from rolling forward and keeping a stance that's upright. It's just a sports stance. And so I spent some time as a tennis instructor and a ski instructor and learned a lot in those years about stance and position. You just want to lower your center of gravity, bend the knees. It's the basic stuff. I know you guys know this, but really pay attention to how you're stacking your body. If you've ever done yoga and gotten into handstands, and you know that what makes a handstand easy is when you stack your body so that it's all the weights in one spot and it's much easier. It's that when you're off just a little bit, you're putting tons of strain on your body. Those 4 forces we talked about. So try not to lean forward or throttling back too much, right? And staying right up center. Your feet. There's a weird change that's happened in this industry. There's a lot of them. This is one. I don't know what caused it, but in my day, wall-to-wall mats, gorilla mats, 3/4 inch thick, of course. I go to bars more and more. Oh no, we don't use mats. We don't want to clean up. We don't need mats. Guys, it's not a tough man competition. You are crushing your body if you're at work sitting on polished concrete, or I don't care what the floor surface is, and you're not putting some kind of padding underneath you. My pride as a bar opener, I got to open about at least 50-some bars in my career, about 30 years, was I love tricking out the bar for the bartenders and the look on their faces when they walked in the first day of training, and it was wall-to-wall mats that didn't move. Beautiful little gorilla mats. And they'd go on there and go, oh, this feels great. That's what it should be. You know, throw the dishwasher $20 a head if you guys don't want to do that because you're cleaning your wells. Whoever, get your bar backs and get those mats back there for your body. It's super important. How many people go home from work with your dogs are barking all night long? How many people in this room, fess up, don't work with bar mats underneath them? Or have like one. By the way, one mat, that's great, except every time you step off it, right? And it slides around. Your head, we talked about the string up Alexander technique, right? Always trying to keep that up, keeping the spine elongated. Okay, specific mechanics. So I work with this doctor of sports medicine who's my PT, and we're going around now and we're doing videos and we're doing talks about really all these problems of biomechanics and bartending. And this is one of the big ones. I was talking to him, I said, so what's like the worst thing? I showed him all the different movements in bartending. What's the worst one? He goes, well, this one's really, really bad. But the worst possible thing you can do is lift your shoulders up over and your arms up over 90 degrees and then turn your wrist with weight. I'm like, oh, you mean like we pour all night long? Great. This is the worst one. So when you're pouring, one of the things that you want to think about and look at is how high up are you pouring and what's the way you're pouring. I do teach a separate class on technical free pouring, and people are like, oh, technical, are you trying to sound fancy? No, I'm trying to differentiate between all the people that think that free pouring means counting to 4 and using the pour checker and exacto pour. There are tons of mechanics to it. And part of those mechanics are trying to prevent you from having carpal tunnel. It's the only long-term RSI injury that I don't have from 20 years of bartending, because I learned at a very young age, at 18 in bartending, that you don't break your wrists. You don't put all the weight of the bottles on your wrist. Intuitively, most bartenders do this. And when I say most bartenders, probably roughly 1,500 bartenders I've personally hand-trained over 20 years all over the world. And everyone I train, even new bartenders, old, they tend to take bottles and turn their wrists. It should be a swing of the bottle and a circular motion and an arc. You want to use momentum to your advantage to get the weight of the bottle, the momentum and the inertia, and get the bottles upright, like you stack your body in a handstand, so that you're not putting all that weight and stress. If you check yourself at work, if you pour and you're here and your bottles are on angles, you're putting a ton of stress on your wrists. So without going up too high, you want to have the elbows up, but keep those shoulders about here. And funny enough, I asked him, I showed him all the different grips we use. How many people use like reverse or inverted grips where you grab the bottles upside down and then flip them up? Anybody? Kind of, there's different styles. Funny enough, the worst one is the one that most of us use, which is the standard pour. The best, the least stress you can put on your wrist, I'm not making this up, don't get mad at me, don't start throwing shit at me, is to take a bottle and do a flip and a half to a pour, to flare. It puts the least stress on the wrist. It puts the bottle, because he said what you really want to be is you want to be in an open palm position. Okay, here, not down here. In fact, one of the things you guys can do, you can spend $5. The one way, since we can't stop this motion, the way you can counteract it is get an exercise, one of these stretch elastic bands, and before and after your shift, all you want to do is come here, open wrist, get the right weight, and just this, okay? Right like this. You just do this before and after work. What you're doing is you're counterbalancing this movement that you're going to do all night or that you did all night, and you're putting your body back in alignment. It's the same thing with weightlifting. You know, if you find that you have a lot of shoulder issue or a hunching in your shoulders and pain in your chest, it's probably because you're only working out one side of your body. You're working out your pecs all the time, but not your back. So all your muscles and all your tendons start to pull in, and you need to pull them back. So that's all we're doing with this. Shaking. You know, it's funny. You know, I like the hard shake. You guys, hard shake, right? Everybody? We're dorks? Awesome. Hard shake, what I love about it is that you're not up here doing these shoulder movements, and you're in a much more ocean neutral work position. So think about all your mechanics. Just think about how high up am I rocking these shoulders and crunching them up and worrying about rotator issues or not, and can I be in this sort of sweet spot where that's not happening? Muddling. A simple way I train muddling, I see a lot of bartenders who, no matter if they're doing the weird pound thing with the ice in there or they're twisting or whatever, but they're up on the 42-inch bar top and they're out here and they're putting all that stress up and down these parts we showed earlier that hit to the C5, C6, and C7. Instead of stacking it all up and using physics to your advantage, get up over the drink. It's It's okay to, one time it's okay to make a drink on the lower bar, wherever you need to, whatever your height is, and get your shoulder in line with the top of the muddler, get a nice grip, and use that force, and it's so much easier. You guys already all there? You guys got that mechanic down? If you don't, or you're training bartenders and you see them doing this muddling out here, really super bad for them. So there's another quick one. When I teach free pouring and a lot of bartending, I notice these little physical tics that come up, and I have them, and most people have them and don't realize it. Catch yourself, next time you go behind the wood and see when you pour, do you do this? You kind of like lean over, all that compression and tension, which is so bad for you and causing these issues. Any skiers in the room? Anyone old school ski? If you ever watch a mogul skier, like an Olympic mogul skier, it's fascinating. Google a clip real quick because it's helpful in bartending. Their upper body doesn't seem to move. The legs take all of the force, their upper body's like this, their hands are going like this. It's called keeping a quiet upper body. And it's the same thing in pouring or any bartending motion you're doing. Try to keep your upper body stable, even level, and not doing all this compression and tension back and forth. I know it's almost impossible the way bars are designed, but do your best to try to not have these tics that end up getting in the neck and the shoulder. Healthier, smarter me's. You know, if you're putting, it's something I talk about all the time. It's like, you ever watch how in a kitchen, where's all their me's and their backup? Right there. Where's ours? Down through the lounge, through the kitchen, in the back, down the stairs, in the back where they put the temporary cooler. Why are we running for all this stuff, and why are we putting it under stuff, and why are we turning around, bending into our low boys, opening up this, bending horribly, which we do, because how many do we really bend properly behind the bar? And we're going like this, and we're picking up a Cambro to take out the mint and whatever else, and crushing our bodies. So think about how can you get everything in more of a sweet spot in this zone where you're not doing so much damage to your body. And the pre and pro shift. Look, if you do hot yoga, if you do all kinds of stretching and exercise, that's super important. It helps. It's not enough. I would highly recommend, if this is your calling and your passion, you do not want to end up a crippled son of a bitch like me, that you end up with all these injuries. Go find a physical therapist now. Talk to a doctor of sports medicine and find out what are the things you need to be focusing on right now. These simple little exercises that can prevent a lot of these problems. All right, well, let's jump in now to the dance, the movement behind the bar, the efficiencies. Okay, so before we jump into this, in terms of biomechanics, we're really talking about a really fascinating subject, I think, about the connection between the brain and the body and how it works. Now, I'm going to start spitting some stuff out. You guys are probably in your head going, yeah, dude, I know that. We all know, like, you need to, like, consolidate everything and automatically know where your stuff is. But we're going to try to go a little deeper. So if you catch yourself going, yeah, I know that, that's kind of a red flag that maybe you might be missing something that you haven't heard before. I spent the last 2 years writing a book that you can't buy because I just don't want to get it published because that's the actual work, that deals with the neuroscience of hospitality, and specifically, how can we leverage the understanding of neuroscience and neurobiology to be better and faster and smarter behind the bar. So, to start with, multitasking. Yes, you can do two things at once, but no, you cannot do two frontal lobe activities at once. And the frontal lobe of your brain is what has all of the decision-making, the critical thinking. So, for example, anyone besides me ever go into a grocery store to buy one or two things and get on a phone call and never find that thing until you're done with the phone call? Am I the only one? A couple more? How about how many times have you driven for like 5, 10, 15 minutes, an hour, and actually not remembered any of the drive? Because you've been listening to the radio, talking on the phone, etc. It is impossible for your brain to focus on two language pieces at the same time. How many people fess up, are on their phone or on Facebook or whatever else while you're watching TV? Show of hands. Yeah, you're not doing both with comprehension. It's one or the other. That's all your brain can do. And you're like, dude, we're bartenders. We're superheroes. We can totally do that. What you're doing is a little bit different. So there's a kind of a distinct difference between driving a route you've always driven and talking on the phone and playing with the radio, and driving somewhere you've never been before and having to read road signs. Your brain can dodge a car without critical thinking. It's a different part of your brain. It comes from sort of the top, center, and back. You're not making a critical decision. You're just reacting. It's just a spatial issue. So this is why you think that you can do all this multitasking, but you really can't. we don't actually parallel process, we serial process. We do one thing and we go back and forth at a very high rate of speed. There's a lot of studies that were done. One of my favorite, it was a scarf study here in New York they did in the 60s to prove this point. And they had a group of people on a street corner and they had all their test subjects and said, we want you to count the number of people you see with red scarves. Point them out and count them. And everyone does it, and piece of cake. They say, okay, now, all the people with red scarves and all the people with blue scarves. The time it takes longer to do both. It's not just twice as long, it's more than twice as long, and they miss some. And then we get into a third color and it all goes to shit. When you try to do three things at once that requires any kind of visual tracking and identification and differentiation, your performance starts to go down. So how do we do what we do behind the bar in every other part of our lives? You tell me, how do we do it? What's it called? What's the kind of memory we're using? Muscle memory, a misnomer because it's not actually, the brain's not a muscle, but that's what we all call it. It's also known as, anybody? Procedural memory is the real technical name for it. And procedural memory is really just consolidation of information through the brainstem into the long-term memory. This is why we are alive as a species, because we can consolidate things that we have to deal with over and over and actually not have our brain involved so that we can use our brain for that one thing, that critical thinking, one task at a time. And in that consolidation process, there's another super cool process called myelination. And if you guys are readers, I highly recommend the book, The Talent Code. The Talent Code talks in depth about myelination. So real simply, myelination is just whatever you do with your life over and over with your brain, whether you're a dancer, a musician, a bartender, doesn't matter, a truck driver, your brain, through the model of scaffolding and plasticity, it actually myelinates or creates superhighways in your neural system. Your neural pathways, the ones you use the most for that activity, they actually get more of this gray matter in your brain that is better at transferring all of the electrical currents through your brain. This is why people become super proficient at sports and other things, is because their brain actually has been rewired to make them better tennis players than you. And we know all the things about 10,000 repetitions and the number of years it takes to master a subject. That's what's going on. The good news is, unless you're an old fossil like me, you have up until the age of 50, your brain still creates this gray matter, this myelin. At that point it slows down significantly and almost stops. You still have time to myelinate. Myelination is basically repeating the same task specifically and precisely. It's called deep practice. And the idea is that you are making sure that your brain is not just remembering this, but it's actually rewiring your brain to be better at this. So if you have a friend who always kicks your ass in something, it's probably because they've been doing it longer with that deep practice. So you got to put the work in. Schema theory. Schema theory basically is, the way your brain works is it uses all the visual stimuli in front of you when you're trying to learn something new. So the basic idea is put yourself in the environment where you need to perform when you practice. This is why the old stories of Larry Bird and Michael Jordan, Larry Bird was famous for going out on that parquet floor and shooting from every spot on that floor, because it helps his brain in that myelination and that consolidation process, his body, to remember, I know this schema, I know this spot. And I used to get in a lot of trouble. I used to do a lot of competitions another lifetime ago, and a lot of problems because I would practice in my garage or wherever else. These were bottle flipping competitions and speed competitions, and I'd have a dial, and I had my white spray painted bar top, and I'd go to the competition. I'd walk up, I'm like, I got this, and it would be a black bar top, and my brain would go, oh shit, brain fart. And I didn't understand it for a while. I'm like, what? And I all of a sudden panic, and all that stuff happens, and I'd shit the bed. Anyone here ever shit the bed in a competition? Just me? All right, yeah, let's hear it for shit the bed. So that's a big part of it too, is like when you think about trying to be better at something, try to practice in that space. I'm massive technical dork, always was in bartending, like badly so. Anyone else practice bartending mechanics? Like not pouring, but just basic shit, like stuff? Okay, phew, feels so much better, thank you. Here's the big one. Okay, so big fancy word, transient hypofrontality. Talking about the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This is being in the zone. Show of hands. Who knows what I'm talking about behind the bar, being in the zone? Okay, you are in a very real chemical state called flow state. where your brain is releasing a series of 4 different chemicals, including serotonin, that is improving focus, concentration, performance, all of it. And you're getting a chemical going through your brain. To get into this state, this flow state, there's a few ways to do it. The number one thing you have to do to get into flow state, there's 2 things really. You got to do all the work and the practice so that it's reaction, so that there is no thought. But does anyone know the real trick to getting into flow state quickly? Who's got an idea? It doesn't matter, just shoot it out. Relaxation, absolutely, being relaxed. If you're a basketball fan like I am, it was legendary in his day. Dennis Rodman, one of the only people at the time that could really repeatedly hold down someone from any other team. They'd always see him on an exercise bike right before he went out on the court. It was to stay loose a little bit, but it was also to get him closer to flow state, to have his body relaxed and warmed up. There's another trick. Anyone have an idea? Visualization, yeah, that can definitely help. Meditation, which I always say that's a great idea. To get your brain, when you get into flow state, your brain goes close to the beta and the theta waves instead of the alpha waves. Who has time behind the bar to meditate? Wouldn't that be awesome? Oh, you do? Oh, you need to find you a new job. Well, that would be a great one. There's a brilliant sports logo that we all know that nails this. It's by a company you might have heard called Nike. Just Do It. Just Do It came out of the idea of experiencing hypofrontality. The frontal lobe is where your inner critic lives. It's the one that says, oh my gosh, I'm not sure. Are people looking at me right now? Do I sound stupid? Do I sound okay? Should I do this? You ever played sports? You ever heard a coach say, get out of your head? Stop overthinking it and just do it. You actually just need to jumpstart yourself and just do the thing. Leap before you look. You turn off your frontal lobe and your inner critic, and it allows you to get into flow state. What I am now talking about, which is hospitality flow state, which is a real weird animal, because we're trying to turn off our frontal lobe, but we need to talk to people. So we have to go in and out of flow state all the time. Okay? So just jumping right in and doing the thing, and finding that trigger activity, whatever it is, your little rhythm. Watch what. Almost every basketball, every tennis player, they have some little ritual they do right before they serve or they do a free throw. And that ritual is to get them to turn off their brain and just do the thing that they know. Find that ritual, make it up, so that you can get yourself. Nobody look around, don't make anyone feel bad, but is there anyone who bartends who's like, what are you guys talking about the zone? I don't know that. Is there anyone that hasn't been in the zone yet? All right, well, I wish there was someone, because you have so much to look forward to. That is my greatest joy being behind the bar. When everything slows down, and you hear and see everything, and it just happens, and everywhere you move, and you're in that dance, and it's just all perfect. God, I miss that so fucking much. Like all the guest bartending we do now, where it's not really bartending, you just have the one batch drink you keep making, and you can't get into the zone with that, right? Okay. So what are the things we can do to get into, to be faster, more efficient, and to get into this flow state? One of the big things I see that I try to, when I train, is there's a lot of bartenders that I think believe that speed comes from moving faster, when in fact speed, of course, comes from efficiency of movement. Any martial artists in the room? So I'm really bad at that too, but I studied Kempo for a little while just from a master because I wanted to learn more about the body and the mind and how this works, and the reaction and the whole kind of Western Zen idea of like Kaizen. And one of the first things that shocked me, but then it made perfect sense was, and he said to me, he goes, when you block, you don't block out here, you're wasting energy. There's nothing happening from here to here. You block only as far as you need to block the punch, and you conserve energy. And when that was applied to bartending, it started making me look at my job a little differently, like, do I have wasted motion? And if it sounds a little out there, think about when you grab a bottle and you pour it. In your minds right now, forget about your body, think about the bottle sitting in the speed rail that has to go into the glass. What is the most efficient path for that bottle to go from that well into that? If there was in a wind tunnel, if it was going through water, what would be the most efficient way? Would it be what we all do? To take the bottle up and swing it out away from the glass and then back in? It would be right from here, straight up in a curve, leading by the pour spout straight up in front of you, which is one of my favorite, sorry to bring it up again, one of my favorite flair moves, just to pour like this. It's not always about being showy when you see people doing things like that behind the bar, it's actually, and I don't know if you guys care or know this, but the roots of real flair that go back to the 80s, where it started with Fridays, had nothing to do with putting on shows. It was, I need that thing in this hand, but I've already got this thing in that hand. I'm getting my ass kicked. I'm 6 deep. What's the easiest way to do that? Oh, just put that here and just swap that over here. So the ability to look at how can I be more efficient. My favorite memory ever, I'll talk about this guy in a second again. It's a bartender most people don't know. His name is Ken Hall. He's a former 6-time world champion at both flair and speed rounds. To put it in perspective, not making the cocktails like we love now, but making wash line, properly garnished, tasted, perfectly poured drinks, 6 of them, including a blender drink. 46 seconds I was there, I saw it. 46 seconds. And if you watch him work, he's not like this. If you couldn't believe it, it felt like 2 minutes. He was just efficiency. My favorite moment, I was working at one of my last jobs at a very busy nightclub in Vegas. And this was about 2000, and Red Bull started to become huge, and we had to put cases of it by our wells. And what did every bartender do with Red Bull, and still does, to be fast? Squeezes it, right? Now this is a guy that used to work for UPS after high school, doing the night shift by himself, unloading trucks and reloading them, and figuring out algorithms to do it faster. And I see him behind the bar, and I'm like, what is that crazy movement? And he was picking up 2 Red Bull cans lightly between his hands while everyone's crushing them. And he figured out that if he put the spouts together and lightly put them together, he could waterfall 2 Red Bulls at once, which matched the flow rate of 1.5 ounces of vodka out of the bottle to have a proper wash line and make it properly balanced. And he could do 4 vodka Red Bulls at a time. This is Vegas, it's like all we do. He could put that Red Bull in there, and what happens when you crush the can? You get the false idea that you're accelerating, well, you are accelerating the flow rate, and then you're trapping all the product at the end. Hi, bar manager. Red Bull that gets trapped in the can and thrown out and never makes it out, and then it slows down. It is never faster to crush that can. But waterfalling works. Ken was a guy that would always, and taught me to always rethink the thing that you've myelinated and consolidated, and not always do things the way you did. So here's this huge paradox in speed bartending. To be fast, you have to forget everything and just react. So it's got to be automatic, right? Except, then you always do things the same way and you're never learning. And you're never doing things in new ways. So one of my favorite drills, I'm going to throw these all up so I don't miss it. Actually, it comes up. I'll share it in a second. Technical free point we talked about a little bit. 10 seconds. In all my years, I have never once met a bartender who strongly has a conviction that jiggering is more precise than free pouring, who is proficient at both styles. Not once. Every person I've ever met who is sure that jiggering is better, they are not proficient at free pouring. And that doesn't mean that that animal isn't growing. I haven't met them. And if you think you're proficient at free pouring, let me pull out an X-Acto pour and ask you to knock out those black lines 1.5 ounce pours right now and see if you're sure about that. And all I'll say on the subject is, if you want to open your mind a little bit, here's 3 things to look up. Parallax error, meniscus, and throughput. If you're taking liquid and you're taking it from one vessel and putting it in an in-meter vessel and then into another vessel, that is not the straightest distance to 2 points. You're also bartending with one hand when you could be using 2. I didn't say free pouring's right and jiggering's wrong. Every bar I've set for the last 20 years, I set jiggers, I train jiggers. Jiggers have a place. Nothing wrong with them, but they're not the end-all, be-all that we've all been taught in the last 10 years to believe. There is another way. There is another path. Join the dark side. Flight paths. You want to get weird and try to get more efficient behind the bar, one of the things you can do is think about the path all the objects you touch take to get into the drink, and are you actually taking the most efficient path? And it might be on another slide, but I'm going to throw it out now. I used to travel and actually real guest bartend all the time for quite a long time, a lifetime ago. And one of the things I learned very quickly was a glass of water. And glass of water was, if I didn't have time to go into the place early, which I used to love to do, first thing I did is I would figure out how I wanted to pour a glass of water. Instead of doing it reflexively, I would go, oh, this weird place has the soda gun on the right. That's strange, but okay. So where's the glass? Where's the ice? And I would try it like 4 different ways. And not only do you figure out a little more efficient than you might if you just did it the way you did it in your last joint, but something happens where you start to get much better at adapting on the fly because it's not always fastest to scoop with your right. Sometimes it's faster with your left because of what you need to do with the other hand. And a great drill to help if you're training people, your bartenders, or for yourself, either physically put a piece of tape down the middle of your station, your well, or mentally do it. And don't ever cross over. And this is big when I do design. If your left hand is crossing over to your right side, the only exception where it's okay, for me, is if both hands have to get something. So if you're getting multiple glass, this is okay. And now we're back to this torsion and compression issues, right? Keep your left hand on the left side, your right hand on the right side. And this is one of those spots I would imagine there's a couple people in the room going, yeah, I know that, dude. I do that. Do you? You want me to come into your bar and be like, oh? Watch yourself. Catch yourself how many times you cross over. And stop and think, man, is there a way to not cross over to do this? Can I minimize that a little bit? And minimize and have some more efficient mechanics. And I always try to think about how can I keep myself in ocean neutral work and 0-1-2 step. And what I mean by 0-1-2 step is pretty simple. A long time ago, we were all working towards two-step bartending, which we all, everything should be within 2 steps, and that's awesome. And then I and some friends started going, can we do 1 step? And now I'm trying to do 0 step, not because I want you planted in one spot all night. Hell no, that would be death sentence. But when you're doing 80% of the volume of the construction of drinks, you shouldn't be moving around. Nobody's making money when bartenders are walking. So how do we keep you in one spot? Neil Peart's drum kit from Rush. How do we keep you here? That's 0 step. 1 step, and when I talk steps, I also talk about the fact that hopefully you guys are all leaning and pivoting. You're pivot bartending. You're not actually walking, and I say that because I train so many times, and I work with bartenders, and I watch them walk places. I'm like, what are you doing? That's not what we do. Get in there. This is a sport. Lean, pivot. So lean and pivot, 1 step bartending, right? So that's here or here, and hitting those zones. If you really want to blow your mind about this whole topic, this is something I said to a guy. He said, how do I get better at flare bartending? I used to train that a lot too, and I said, you're not going to like the answer, but I'm going to give it to you. Don't fucking flare. Stop flaring. Go through a whole shift and don't flip a thing, and see all the other parts of this thing we love that you're missing out on because you're focusing on that. And I'll flip it to everyone else who isn't in that camp. You want to get better and be faster? Learn flare. I didn't say do flare. I didn't say do it behind your bar. Just learn it. Learn anything. I will go out on a limb. I hope it doesn't make anyone mad, but if you think it's hard to be fast making cocktails, try doing everything you do at work, but throwing all that shit behind your head without looking when in the dark and catching it and not stabbing yourself and breaking it, which I also was the worst at. I invented the drop. That's my move, and the break. But if you learn all these things that you probably don't believe right now, but you learn all kinds of things about centripetal and centrifugal force and liquid. And there's times someone hands me a full glass of water, and I used to wait tables for a while too, and I'd grab it, and I'd jump off and run through the crowd and be moving what the fuck? And I'm like, what? You learn how to move liquid a little bit differently than when you're a little more static. It's amazing the kind of things that come to you. So find someone who's good at it, learn it, decide if you hate it or love it, doesn't matter, but pick up something. If you actually can go through and make a drink quickly, cleanly, and well, with flair, and you don't learn how to be a faster bartender, I'd be stunned. It's almost an impossibility. Any friends up there? These are some of the fastest bartenders I've seen behind a bar and in competition. That's that guy Ken I was telling you about in his 46nd round. I'm sure you guys know some of my friends, our friends up here. So what about just plain flat out fucking speed? What can we do? Not just smarter me's, but more militant me's. So I don't have to preach to you guys. Everyone knows you put things in the same spot, right? But how many people, I used to have my bar back, Andrew Pollard. I love saying that because it's true. I used to have my bar back, Andrew Pollard, who's now running Win. Told him the first day he bar backed me, I said, if you really want to bar back, as an example, okay, you asked for it. I want 7 quarter folded towels with a blue stripe here and the edges here. I don't want 6, I don't want 8, I don't want the stripe going this way. And he's just his eyes started getting bigger. When you put the bev naps in the caddy, I want the corners facing this way. And I told him all this stuff and he did it, best bar back I ever had. And over time he started to see the kind of crazy, maybe, I don't know if it's wisdom, but the experience of it. And it's not just about having things kind of in a place. And to give you an example, you don't have to put your hands up, but you can put an imaginary hand up. How many people keep their tools in a mason jar or an ice cream dipper well? How many people, don't have to put your hands up, put their Hawthornes on hooks? Okay, let's go back to that by the neuroscience. When your brain has to track an object because you slightly miss it, you can't find it, that's frontal lobe. You're out of flow state and you're thinking now and you're not listening. We're really good at pretending we're listening to the guests, right? We're so good at that. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right on, man. Oh, I hear you. Meanwhile, you're doing your fucking laundry list in your head of all the things you got to do next. Trying to figure out how not to do that is leveraging schema theory, knowing where every object is exactly precisely. I wanted 7 towels because I knew I had 7 towels, and I did that with every object because the second something was out of par, my brain knew without me thinking in a heartbeat. In fact, when I managed the college bar, I turned around, no mirrors, and I turned back around this 20-foot bar, and I just went, dude, can I have my strainer back? And he's like, how the fuck did you see that? I'm like, because I turned around and the strainer at station 2 was missing, and there's no one working there. And then I looked up and it was sticking out of your fucking pocket, you drunk. But anyway, militant mise is the angle of the Hawthorne strainer. It's all that stuff. And it's putting things in a place where your hand can always get to it exactly where it needs to be. Like, you probably are better at jiggering than I am, but when I set bars with jiggering, I always used a 1/2 and a 3/4, 1 1/2, and I always set the small sides up and the big sides down. And trained bartenders, because it's the worst. You feel like such an asshole when you have to go and look at the marking. The new bartenders, they're trying to look cool behind the bar, and they're like, hang on a second, that says 1/2, I can't see. We know the small sides are up, we know the big sides are down. I split the jiggers so they're one on each side, so they always know there's 1/2, there's 1, there's 3/4, there's 1 1/2. There's no thought, there's no looking, there's no tracking, there's no frontal lobe, it's reaction. Divide and conquer. And we talked about that, that's the take down the middle. I don't know, you guys do this too? When someone has a recipe, I know mostly you just react, but let's say it's a new recipe. Are you thinking in ounces and mils and recipes? Because I'm in counts. Like, if I'm making a Tommy's, don't tell Julio that I don't do 844, which is 211. I do 532. So 5 tequila, 3 lime, 2 agave. And then that led me to, wait a minute, and it happened mathematically. I went, 5, 3 plus 2, hey, that's 5 and 5. And then went, holy shit. And a friend of ours in Vegas, Gaston's, like 10 years ago, like, why are you keeping your citrus and your sweetener separate? Because they're preservatives, like it'll get a longer shelf life. Like, oh shit. And the agave starts to break down in viscosity, and all of a sudden now, I can open bars like I always do and teach a Tommy's margarita and say, so here's what you need to do. Grab this bottle and this bottle and pour them the same amount, and you have a balanced margarita, even if you don't hit the 5 and 5. Did I lose you at all? No? You good? Okay. Does anyone else work in just counts? Or I don't know, jigger fills or something that's not the actual recipe? Try that if you don't. Start trying to work in a different system that is faster and simpler for your brain and breaks it down. Head on a swivel. I mean, it was an old bartender thing when I was doing this. We used to have this game. If I could walk into your bar, didn't matter how busy you were, anytime, on my day off, and I could get from the door to a bar seat, plant my ass in a bar seat, you didn't see me, you're an asshole. And I'm going to bust your balls all night long. Because your head should be up and you should see the whole room, and you should see every person in that room. My bar back's in the room right now. You should see everyone. And famously, back when people watched actual TV, I was on a show with a celebrity Iron Chef, and that son of a bitch got right up in front of me, and I was making a drink, and I turned around, and I was like, oh, Bobby Flay, what's up? And I'm like, fuck, I'm an asshole. The ability to be great behind the bar, I think, comes from realizing that you learn the drinks so that you can forget them, so you can focus on what really matters, and that's the people in the room, right? Genuinely. It's the hospitality that really matters. And just like an athlete, you need to have your head in the game all the time. Like, when I train baristas and bartenders to watch people's movie, the idea of tracking someone through a room so you know their story by the time they get to the bar. So you understand their need state and what's going on. Well, if you're looking down, that's not happening. We know that, right? Rookie bartenders down here. But here's the thing. Right now, every room's a bartender. I want you to do this, play this game with me. Don't look at anyone else. I just want you to ice up a glass right now. You don't have to stand up. Just pretend you're icing a glass. Go ahead and do what you normally do. Really, forget everyone. Close your eyes. You're behind your bar, take your arms, ice up a glass. Go ahead and do it. You lying sons of bitches. Because I watch all of you, I go to all your friggin' bars, and I train a lot of people, and most bartenders do what when they scoop ice? Head down. Looking in that giant fucking trough of American ice that Europeans are like, look at the vanilla ice. And you can't miss. Get your head up. When you train bartenders, train them hospitality triggers, mechanical triggers. And that's my favorite one. I've got another one called Find the Lemon, but this one to get their heads up. This one is, I train all my bartenders, don't stare at your ice. There's no information on your ice. I'm not sure which bartender, probably a friend of mine, started this thing where you take the drink and you go, Then you stare at your shoes. You got recipes on your shoes? What are you looking at? All the information that matters is out there. Get your fucking head up. Head on a swivel. Track that room. See the schema, the moving schema. You ever work with like a really, really badass veteran bartender who's been doing it in the same room for 20 years? And they notice people when they're 9 deep walking in and out of the room? It's because there's so many statics. Anyone know that video of the cat that freaks out about the cucumber? It's not cucumbers. It's danger. There's a new object that was hidden behind them that wasn't there. Cats are very perceptive of their environments. And all of a sudden they're like, what the hell is that? That could be a threat. Same thing behind the bar. The more you see all the time, the easier it is to actually connect with people because you start to really notice all the people that you know and the things going on. Find the lemon is a trainer trick. I used to walk around all my trainings. Day one, I'm trying to teach them to get their heads up and pay attention so they can give hospitality. But they're all focused on all these mechanical skills we all geek out and want to teach them, right? So they're not learning, they're not myelinating and repeating the actions that I want to on the bar because I'm the one making them like focus so much on the drinks. So instead I go, guys, game the whole rest of training. I'm going to have a lemon with me at all times. It's going to be somewhere in the room. And I'm going to ask you all the time, where's the lemon, where's the lemon, where's the lemon? And the first time I stop everyone and go, where's the lemon? There's always like 2 people that go, right there, it's over there. And everyone else is like, And about 3 days later, it's like, I'm like, where's that? They're all 14 hands all point to one spot. And now, on opening night, and this is the fun part of these triggers and tricks. Instead of me have to be the hard ass going, get your head up, and embarrassing them in front of people, or being like, dude, all I gotta do, it's so much fun, I just walk around opening night, mock service, and just go, just hold the lemon up, and they laugh, they get the message. Like hand grenade theory, one of my managers had. He walked through a dining room one night and he goes, I'm like, Phil, what the hell was that? He's like, oh, hand grenade theory, which is, oh, if I can take out like half of my service staff with one hand grenade, you're not in the right fucking place. Get back to your stations and your job. And every night he just go, and then we start like diving into over like cafes and pretending we're going, no! But it was an effective way to make it fun, but teach those things quickly in a room. OTP, I don't care how fast you are at making drinks. If you don't have a pristine drawer that's on the penny every night, that means you're probably not handling your till quickly. How fast are you getting in and out of your drawer? Do you do math or do you count when you make change? How many people deal with a lot of new bills like we do all the time in Vegas? Cash. I know there's not a lot of cash anymore, but when people use it, it's a nightmare in Vegas and it's all hundreds. Those little pink things the bank tellers use, they don't work. Take a bar towel, sop the shit out of it with water, put it next to your till, hit your hand on that wet towel, bills will pull apart every single time like that brand new 2501s. Just quick little things. And finally, use the Force, because we're all Jedi, right? We're working on, or Sith. If you haven't ever gone behind your own bar, put a blindfold on, when it's closed, when no one's around, safely, and made all your drinks and figured it out, that's an incredibly fast way to throttle your speed. Accelerate that process of myelinating and consolidating and making your body do the work instead of your brain. All right, we are over time, but we represent the ladies as well. All the pictures of bartending are always men. So we got this up here. All right, some other quick ones. Pulling ice. You don't dump ice, you pull it. You take your scoop that's properly sized, you fill it. It has the same yield as your glass. You put it in the bottom of the glass and you pull the scoop up. It's quieter, it's faster. How many times have you watched a bartender take a 10 or a 14-ounce glass and scoop twice to fill it up, but they have a 14-ounce scoop? Because they're missing the glass and spilling over it and they're cross-contaminating over their hand into the ice. Split similars. Every time I set a bar, Corona Light, never go next to each other. In a well, I never put Absolute Citron and Absolute Mandarin next to each other. In a dark room, staring down at 2 bottles that look identical. Thinking, tracking, no hospitality flow state. Split them up, move them out. Bev naps, my favorite tool behind the bar. Corners, direction of the corners for the bev naps, so that I can put hands in, fan them apart, open it up, and drop in the different glasses. Drop everything in. I know what the order is, I remember, and then when the order gets picked up and they don't use them, I can take them and wipe the bar and keep it clean bar top. Boy Scout grip is a method of holding a bottle I can't show you, but you can look it up online and Google it. It takes all the force off the wrist and allows you to do 2 and 4 bottle pours in a very easy manner. It's non-intuitive. It is not sticking your fingers between the 2 bottles. What Tal we talked about. Notice new things. Every time you're at work, look around the room and notice something you didn't notice before. It's amazing. I do this drill at every training for every company I work with, every hotel, Starbucks, all of them, and say, hey, let's walk through the room and don't walk the path you always walk to go to the bathroom. Pick a different path and look around. And someone will go, holy shit, when did we get those light fixtures? The day we opened. Or how many people that work always notice that there's crap behind the fruit caddies or a post that you don't notice? Notice the things. Start looking for new things and enhance your schema theory. All right, I want to move to the next section. I'm so sorry. I didn't practice this well. That's not what you think it is. This is my actual favorite. This is my favorite measure of a great bartender, technically. Can you make a drink in a tin, quickly, to recipe, and then have a glass with ice and dump that drink, power dump that into the glass in the perfect wash line? Are you slowly pouring and doing the cheat where you pretend like it was perfect and then you put it in the sink and no one sees? When I see a bartender, when I walk in a bar, no matter what kind of bar it is, and they do that, I'm like, that's a bartender. That bartender has got this down. All right, 2 minutes left. So how do we apply this to design then? One of the ideas is, why are we allowing architects, no offense, but architects and food equipment people that have never made drinks to design our stations still in 2018? Every other thing we've gotten involved in. Why are our service wells like the same as the other well? The point in the well shouldn't be the same. And on that note, which I train designers all the time, every bar has two natural points. It has a point and a well. The point is the inflection point where guests walk into the bar first, it gets crushed. The well is where you the service well. Don't ever set up a bar where the point is the well. That's chaos. You're asking for death. What I try to think about is all the things I just taught you, how can I design for the specific workflow based on the PMix, the program, everything, the volume, the pro forma, the valuation of the real estate that person wants, because that's why they really open the bar, not because they know they can't make money in the bar business. And how can we hit those numbers? And can I reverse engineer the pro forma? If you say you're going to do $4 million a year and you're going to do a 35% beverage, well, if you want that 1.33 in beverage, I'm going to break that down by shift, by hour, by bartender, and go, you don't have enough stations. And you definitely don't have bartenders that are going to be doing $1,900 an hour every hour, unless the drinks are $20 a pop, like they are where I live. And how can we do this smarter and design from the inside out? Some of the questions I get, this is the most common dimension question I get. How far should the overhang be over the equipment? That's not the right question. The right question is, how far should the bartender's thighs that are up against the rail be from where they make their drinks on the scupper so that they are in ultra-neutral work in the fastest, most efficient, healthiest position possible? And in my experience, that space is somewhere the sweet spot between 10 and 12 inches. Too much more, and most bars are set up at 14, and you got this. You got all those problems and all that slowness and all that pain. And then your boss says, hey, smile. You know what? You fucking stand like this for 40 hours a week and smile and rip your knees and your clothes up. Ocean work zone is from 18 inches to 80 inches. If there's anything you're grabbing below 18 inches or above 80, reset your bar, have it redesigned, move stuff around. The average wingspan for 5th percentile women, 95th percentile men is between 52 and 72 inches. 80% of the things you grab the fastest should be there. And here's my favorite design mistake all the time. People spend money on me to help me design their bars, and I get this about 1 in 10 times. Don't worry about the draft. We got a draft guy. Don't worry about the beer. Where are the towers? No, we got it. Where are they? Oh, we got them one on each side of the bar. Great. What are they running? Well, we got 6 beers here, 6 beers here, 6 beers here. Oh, so every time I go to get a beer, and you're going to have a P-mix of at least 30% beer, I got to run around the bar to go get the Bud Light because you didn't repeat your towers. Why are you paying me money to give you an efficient station if 40% of your drinks are 30%? I got to walk 10 feet for? Holistic hospitality design. Bartenders need a seat at the table. That is what I'm spending my life's work on doing now, is getting us a seat at the table next to the architects, next to the IDs, the GCs, and the investors, and saying, we're not trying to tell you we don't need you or not to do your job. We need you. You're awesome. I'm a design nerd. I'm an architectural nerd. But we know stuff that you don't know that matters, that makes a difference. So give us a seat at the table and let's work together and collaborate to make smarter, better, healthier bars. No time for this. I'll skip it. This is just me trying to show off and humble brag about a fancy job I did. If you guys, is there anyone here that works in a back house service bar? If you haven't, they're awesome. I love them. You can put so much volume out. When you were asked, as I was in this place for the GM headquarters, for these 300 seats, they gave me that space. It was an 8x10 room with a doorway for the service and kitchen staff. So I could do beverage and cocktail carts that they were going to put in the PDRs, the private dining rooms. So in the middle of the dining room, when they're having dinner, you're going to have someone keep going in and making all that noise, refilling the carts. Have you done carts before? So the quick thing was, whenever I draw a bar, the first thing I do is I drop a bartender block in. Always. To remind myself, because it also feels cool, but this is what I'm doing. This is who I'm doing this for. And that's what matters most back there. And then what are the reaches and the distances, the dimensions are what is that dimension? That's how far it'll take the bartender to get from the front bar to the back bar. These are things that matter. And trying to fit the most efficient equipment setups together. And then showing people workflows. But the funniest part is all that work and nobody wants to see it. If you want to design bars for a living, no one wants to let you do it. It pays like shit because they all do it for free because they sell the equipment. And no one cares, and you'll never see a press hit about your equipment. Except for Joaquin, God bless his heart. You'll always just see this. This is what people care about. You have to master the invisible and realize that nobody but us cares. But one day maybe people will. But that's, for me, engine design is what it's really all about and what matters. So funny if you're into cars, right? Anyone that's really into cars, first question, what's under the hood? How many times do you walk in a brand new beautiful bar and the design groups I work with built them and they're stunning and gorgeous, and then you do that thing and peer over the bar and you go, yeah, same old 1962 bar design. Awesome, can't wait to work back there and rip up my clothes and bang my shins. What's under the hood? So all this stuff put together, this is what's under the hood that I spent my life's work trying to get for you guys. I'm not going to waste any time talking about the stuff that's obvious, because there's a really dangerous thing out there right now. I will never, only in these rooms and privately will I talk about it. I will never blast on social media. Everyone gets super excited about seeing stations that have lots of stuff, because we never had lots of stuff. We had to walk for it. The danger of lots of stuff, it's actually design theory called feature creep. And it's the idea of putting way too many buttons on shit because that's people, oh, these knobs and buttons. The problem is no one thinks about the ergonomics, the flight paths, the reach. So you got all this stuff, but you have to grab your squeeze bottles like this over the top. And you have to precisely grab things, and they're hard to get to. And the bar top is, you're standing like this, and you've got two people that are too crowded together. You want to think about these things we talked about. So the things you can't see are these speed rails that I designed to be thicker steel, hand bead polished, rounded, and higher, so there's more surface area disbursement on all heights and genders of bartenders, so it's less painful to lean up into. And they don't bend and trap your bottles inside. Things like viscoelastic dampening pads underneath all the ice bins and the sinks and the wells to cut down on vibration and noise. So it's not such an irritant for the guest and for yourself. The first problem I tried to solve was, how do I get bartenders out of this? Most design patents for bar equipment go back to the 1960s for underbar, front bar, truth. And they were done by people that never made a drink in their lives. They were called work boards. And the problem is the distance was always like this. This ice bin is 4 inches shallower, 2 inches higher. Less stooping and bending, almost the same cubic volume. But now instead of this, you're like this in your happy place where you've always wanted to be. Okay? That's my little spiel about that. This is how you can get in touch about some of the stuff I'm working on. I am trying to get more bartenders involved in design. If you've got a project you're involved in as a bartender consultant and you're like, I'm not getting anywhere with the designers, hit me up. I promise I will eventually get back to you, and I will help give you the vocabulary and the things and the way to deal with them so that you can actually get something done. Because when you ask them for their CAD plans like I do every time, they're going to send you a PDF because they don't think you actually know how to use AutoCAD. And then they find out you do, and they're like, yeah, man, I draw, it's cool. Like, I want to help, let me in. So anything I can do to help you guys out, that's, what do we got here? Instagram, Facebook, galactic interwebs, and life. Thanks for your time, guys.
I'm on it. Did I tell you? I did. Let's hear it again for Tobin Ellis, everybody. I think we all learned something. All learned lessons. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to pick up quickly what these are, you can come and get them.
If you want to know more about the bar station that they made me put my name on, which is really awkward.
Great.
George is getting very angry. George Costanza.
Exactly.
There's brochures right up here.
Thank you again. And next up, we were going to have Julie Mamos talking about spirit-free drinks.